Hello everyone! It's this time of the year again, Major. Indeed, a very so merry trial wheeled year, bringing so many regrets. So here I present to you, struggling or not, a guide for Railway 5. In this video, I explain to you the mechanics of this railway and how to pass them in the best way. But before we begin, if you don't have the IDs mentioned, tough luck, but don't worry. There are multiple ways of passing the railway. It can be tough, this one being kinda nasty, but multiple buffs can make this feasible, as I'll explain. I still recommend having your most crucial IDs at the highest level and some strong AoE egos thread spinned. If you're wondering how I've been doing, my first run was with Burn and Kurokumos, ending at 53 turns, and my second run more optimized with Bleed and Poise at 44. It was pretty good, and both attempts are available if you wanna check them out. Also, the railway does include some story spoilers, so you've been warned. But anyway, this railway is divided into 3 sections of 3 to 4 waves. It functions mostly like the previous one. You choose all 12 Sinnohs for a chain battle, your first 6 on the field and the other 6 in backup. ID's death won't reduce allies' SP and will give some scene resources based on the ID. Each section is a fight, with each station being a wave of the fight. So each section will be a single fight, with 4 waves for sections 1 and 3 and 3 waves for section 2. You are keeping ego resources between sections, but not sanity or HP, which are reset. This railway's specificity lies in between the waves. After each one, including the last one of the section, you'll be able to choose one buff among a fixed selection that will last for the rest of your run, including other sections. But careful, since they will also give buffs to enemies. I will be explaining each selection in this guide as well. You also can't choose the same IDs for section 1 and 2, so you will need at least 2 different teams ready for it, and make sure you don't have any of your second team in your first one backup. Section 3 has no restriction. It's also the first railway where we can use Superbiae, the new Durant is active. So before going into the section details, a bit of general advice for preparation. As I said, make sure you have at least 2 teams ready. And do not neglect backups, as they might come in handy in some occasions. We recently got some stuff wanting to sacrifice allies, and with the scene resources and chain battle bonuses, there's incentive to actually have your ID skilled, which can result in a better situation. The buffs in this railway can be pretty strong, and some keywords are really advantaged as well, mostly posed due to multiple buffs. If you're having trouble, you might want to pick different buffs. As I said as well, it's the first railway where Superbiae can be used, and this can be very potent, being a free ego use. One of the best usage you can probably do is in one of the first turns. Sections being long fights, ego passives can be very potent, stay active for a long time, especially in section 1. This combined with Superbiae allows you to get a head start from turn 1. Egos you can use depend on your team, but generally good ones include Ryoshu's Contempt How, whose passive will get you many resources through the fight, or Thorakalgia if you have an ally to kill, especially Antaniesang, which will give you many resources on the spot, and good poise generation if you're playing it, Fellblade being similar but without poise support. Faust Fluid Sac, Ishmael's Blind Obsession, and Iscliff's Yasunyata also offer very good SP jumpstart if you want it. Or it can be any ego whose passive you feel is very valuable, like Iscliff's Binds. Just remember that section 1 is mainly bosses. For keywords, Burn loves having magic bullets used early for insane damage, Rupture probably wants the Sang Dimension Shredder as well, Poise benefiting from Ryoshu's Thorakalgia, while Contempt How will help bleed. It can be used to quicken the first boss as well, like Onglu's Cavernous Wailing for Tremor, Rhymeshank for Sinking, Sanguine Desire for Bleed, or Dawn's Teleport for Charge. Remember that you can freely overclock with it to use Corrosion, but the SP cost will be high. Several fights feature Envy Pekatula once more. If you don't know them, those are fights with enemies having the exact same properties as some IDs in the game, also having access to egos, passives, supports, and even backups. Basically, everything you can do, they can as well, except Durante. This means if they can wreck your team using egos, you can as well. And egos with high attack weight are very valuable against them, so think about keeping some ego resources for those fights. But that's about it for introductions. I'll be presenting each station one by one, with their related buffs afterwards, and present my team recommendations at each section's end. So let's start with section 1 and station 1, the bear. No, not this one. Not this one either. There we are. So first boss is Hurting Teddy Bear. Poor Teddy. It's indeed gonna be hurt. Its mechanic is based around its statuses, faint memories and attachment. The first one is on it, increasing its defense, being reduced when losing clashes. The second one is inflicted on your Sinners, increasing Teddy's clash power. So you'd want to win clashes against its skills, while being careful of attachment not stacked too much on one Sinner. However, spread it too much and it will use a very strong AoE. If you clash with Expression of Love, it will use Rough Expression of Love on the Sinner the following turn, or a Side Embrace if Faint Memory stacks are lower than the target's number of negative status, which will replenish your SP, not dealing damage, before staggering itself. Yeah, a kind Teddy. And that's about it. So when you clash, rinse and repeat until it's down. It has a few unbreakable coins, so be careful, especially on counters. It has an event to reduce its clashing power as well. A good time to remind clashing counters will clash against the first unopposed attack. You better remember it. Its weaknesses are, as shown, being weak to Pierce, Wrath and Envy. So Burn and Charge Envy IDs are having a nice time, as well as the Envy crew. The fight is pretty simple, and is literally the entry mark. After completing the fight, you will have the choice between 3 buffs: Refracted Mind, healing some SP every turn, Infliction Refraction, increasing keywords potency infliction, and Gain Refraction, increasing poise and charge count gained. All buffs will give enemies 1 level, so don't worry about it. Refracted Mind is the most general, and I'd say useful choice, allowing you to struggle less at section starts, and reducing Ego's effective sanity cost. If you're using keywords a lot, Infliction can be okay, but will only be really useful in limited cases. Gain is not recommended, because charge gain isn't too much of a problem anyway, and poise has a much better buff later on, so unless you're using poise now and really want the count, or have a very tight charge gain, you would prefer avoiding it. Next, we go into the second wave, featuring Rose Hunter, who doesn't like pomegranates. Its main gimmick is inflicting your Sinners with Barbed Lasso with this skill. This will spawn a small unit binding the Sinner, inflicting some rupture and increasing the stack while alive until the Sinner gets staggered. It gets benefits from enemies being snared, including its big AoE every few turns, and can really make your Sinner suffer if left alive, so try to free the Sinners every turn with AoE if possible. The unit is frail and will be destroyed with most skills. It likes to inflict rupture a lot, more than your IDs at least, so be careful of not taking too much true damage. It has a check early on to reduce its stat a bit as well. Its weaknesses mainly include Slash and Wrath, Lust and Pride following. So once again Burn is king, with some Poison Bleed IDs also benefiting, mostly the Slash ones. Overall, just try to beat it up while not letting your Sinner stay snared, and the fight shouldn't be too much trouble. Now, before getting to the next station, we're getting a bunch of buffs to choose from. We find back the first 2 from section 1 that were not chosen, as well as 1 for every keyword. All give enemies 1 level, except the bleed one increasing their bleed infliction from skills. This can be dangerous for section 3, unless you're taking Bloody Banquet later on, or have bleed reduction. But about the buffs. Tremor and Burn are associated, activating Burn and bursting Tremor once at the end of each turn for 1 count. This seems like a sweet deal, especially for reverb if you don't have Magic Bullet, but the count reduction could mess up some of your rotation, so if you don't have many count or don't feel confident in keeping it, you might want to avoid it. Bleed's buff gives a head start of 5 potency and 3 count to all enemies at the start of a wave, which can be pretty good if you're playing Bleed to start, fulfilling some conditions. If you feel very confident on count however, maybe base potency buff could be better. Rupture increases kills final power by 2 if they inflict it. Yes, I really don't want you to play with the keyword. But more seriously, it can be pretty good in some situations. Skill's final power is just good, and concerns skills inflicting rupture potency or count, so it might very well increase skills such as W Dawn's Rip Space or Rabbit Escliffe's Quick Suppression, so it might just be good depending on your IDs, and still better for rupture than the rest. Sinkings increases damage on enemies at low or without SP by skills based on potency, basic but good. Poise and Charge can be some of the best in their archetypes. Poise increases damage by up to 50% on crit with enough poise, while Charge increases Envy's weakness for the fight when consuming enough charge, while also increasing damage when consuming or gaining it up to 50% as well. This can increase both keywords damage by a lot, especially for charge, relying slightly less on damage multipliers. But overall, it's mostly just a question of taking what your keywords are. You should think about which teams you will be using in all section when taking your decision however, and you will be able to choose another one next selection, so prefer your current team or your second, and keep the next one for the following teams. But enough about those buffs. It's time to fight a fish, a ant, and a rock. Those things are a pain, and might be some of the most annoying enemies in this railway. Why? Just look at this. Resistant to all physical types, and all except 2 scenes each. Especially the rock, having even higher HP, damage reduction on passive, and giving itself protection. Furthermore, the Gloom one can sink down your whole sanity if not handled carefully, and the Rust one can just deal very high damage and spread burn. Fighting all 3 at once means that statuses can also be tricky to manage, to top it all. Their mechanics aren't too far-fetched though. They will try to inflict you with Tremor, Burn, and will inflict you with Sinking due to Unbreakable Coins and passive, so just deal with their skills as best as you can, no real secret. The only trick might be to be careful on the rock's protection. If you target it with a skill, it won't activate before the skills lands, delaying the protection. Scene's weaknesses can vary, but Gloom and Gluttony are both present on 2 of them, Lust and Envy only on 1 each. So Sinking isn't too bad, Rupture as usual, but you would mostly want strong skills of each, like Deviat's skill 3, Wild Uncleave's skill 3, Rip Spaces for the Gloom one, or Bloodfiend's skill 3 for the Wrath one. Overall, just try to burst them down as best as you can, no real trick to it. Afterwards, you'll have the occasion to choose one of the buffs you didn't select yet. Taking Refracted Mind if you didn't is still a good option, but otherwise you might want to think about your upcoming teams for section 2 or 3 if you have a third one. It's your last chance to choose them though, so be careful. And so we get to the last part of the section, and the first new abnormality of the railway, Sleeping Bag of a Bygone Day. No, not like the Eagles. First of all, it uses poise a lot, starting at 10-10, and can lose both count and potency from being hit. However, it cannot have less than 5 of each, so trying to remove it by reducing count is pointless. Its skills will gain power depending on its poise, and so will its critical hits. It has 3 parts, the head, the body, and the person. The person won't be targetable until you break the body, where it will be targetable for 1 turn. Killing it will increase the Abno's physical weaknesses, so once it's targetable, you should focus your damage on it. It has the weakest resistances as well, and inflicts itself with 2 fragile. So the strategy is to focus the body as much as possible to break it, its stagger threshold being at midlife, before killing the person. Its head having the most resistances, just confirming it. The body you will use That's Mine every few turns, once on each Sinners with fixed targeting, which is one of the best time to break it. Otherwise it would use a strong AoE on the following turn. When at low health or if the head is staggered, it will use a very powerful AoE that you better win clash against, with a choice beforehand, either reducing its resistances in exchange for additional critical damage on the skill, or giving your Sinner's protection for the turn. The skill cannot stagger you if you win clash, so taking the first option is better, unless you really don't want to take too much damage, like if you're really weak to it. Its weaknesses vary depending on the part, but Lust and Wrath are the most present, especially Lust for the head as well. So IDs with strong Lust skills, such as Bloodfiends or Kurokumbo's Cliff, as well as some Burn IDs, are pretty good for it. Once you've beat it, you'll have the choice between 3 unique buffs related to the Amno, all increasing enemy level by 2. Weakness Destroyed increases damage against destroyed or staggered parts, including 1-part enemies, aka most of the railway. This is just bonus burst damage for those times, and can be useful against most bosses especially. A single breath increases ego damage, which is especially useful for damaging egos, mostly for NVP Catula fights, where you would want to use a few, or special damaging ones if you wanna use even more. Last is Nebulizer, doing just that. It gives you high poise gain each wave start, and can give you even more when activating Pride Res, not Absolute Res, each turn. So the first one is just good overall damage if you don't intend to use much egos, and are especially good when planning bursts against bosses with stuff like Rip Space. Eagle's buff is very good, however, for the upcoming Pokatula fights, and you might want to take it to have an easier time with them, especially because most Eagles don't have damage multiplier, giving more benefits than on skills, which often have a lot. However, the hidden gem is still Nebulizer. Not only does it synergize insanely well with the poise buff from before, giving any poise team very high value, even more so considering crit damage will apply to Eagles as well, but at this point it might also allow your non-poise IDs to crit, increasing their overall damage as well, especially if you're able to produce a Pride Resonance here and there. It's one of the biggest reasons to play poise in the second section, but I'll come back to it later. For this section, as the introduction of the Railway recommends, bringing Wrath and Envy is pretty valuable, but so is Lust, making Burn, Bleed and Charge pretty good archetypes here, as well as the Envy team with Middle and Pequod. Burn and Bleed especially, with respectively Magic Bullet and the Blood Fiends, can be very strong now in dealing with bosses. OTC Go Magic Bullet with Superbia right at the start can increase burn damage by miles, and can easily clear the wall section, especially if you keep a 6 bullet for Pekatulas. Plus being pretty good for it as well, having Blood Fiends and the new Rukurukumos can really do high damage on enemies. It's also a good team to benefit from Contempt Tower on turn 1, giving you good scene generation with Ryosho. Corroding it will make Ryosho corrode next turn as well, letting you use it twice in a row for very high bleed infliction on the bear, some Kurukumos and Blood Fiends also having access to easy Lust Resonance with their clashable counters. Charge as well could use Telepole early on for a quick charge boost, allowing the bear to be burst down very quickly. The rotation of skill trees might be slower, but keeping one for Pekatulas can also make quick work of them, quite a few charge IDs also having access to good Gloom skills for this section. Envy can be just as strong as well, with Middle Dawn dishing out damage from counters and Pequod Cliff unleashing nukes if you manage to get him at low HP. I can't really recommend either Sinking nor Tremor, as most bosses are resistant to Sloth or Gloom. You could also mix a team of a few very strong units, such as Wildland Cliff, who could take a bit of time building coffins, but who can probably easily destroy the third wave, as well as LC Faust and a Rast Nuke, with their self-destruct giving more resources as well. Deviats could be a replacement for her as well, to nuke the third wave. They will need to be substituted if used early though, which could be a strategy as well, or even letting them die. While poise for the section isn't too good due to Pride being resisted, a few Wrath and Envy skills can be found on some BL and Pequod. Just make sure you're getting the Eagle's resources you need for the following sections, as you're gonna need them. By the way, the HP and defense level shown here will be slightly lower than in practice, with the enemies level up. So we're entering section 2, the possibly fastest section, full of Envy Pekatulas, starting with your worst nightmares, Firearms. This wave is constituted of 6 IDs with ammo, featuring LCCB and full stops. The former isn't too dangerous outside skill 3, but the latter is. Ammo units are known for their early short-term ability to burst, and getting a skill 3 to the head from Solemn Lament Kisang or one of the full stop certainly matches the description. There is no backup here, so clear the 6 enemies and you're good. They are pretty frail outside LCCB Ishmael, so you can probably make quick work of most of them with a few good Eagles. The SP healing ones are advised as well, due to your SP being reset at 0. This leaves Yasunyada and Faust Fluid Sac particularly for being blunt, one of the most useful types here, as well as Holiday on Atsu attack weight. This Cliff's Binds is great for this part as well, being able to set up nasty AoEs on the following turn with its buffs, and this version can deal high damage, stagger with Fracture, and set up high scenes gain over the next few turns. If you've been picking up poise buffs, you might also want to use Thorakalgia for setup, or even both, though I'd mostly recommend Ryosho's with Sacrifice ready. ID wise, not much to recommend due to the nature of Pekatula fights, except also AoEs, and those benefiting from enemy death, like Wildland Cliff. You might want to use this wave to prepare for the next one, slightly more complicated. Once cleared, you have access to a whole new selection of buffs to choose from. This group includes 6 general use buffs with diverse uses, as well as 6 different enemy buffs. Let's start with the most simple ones. Wrathful Counter will give you ID's offense level up when hit, while giving enemies this or defense level up, just as a lower rate. If you don't plan on getting hit, this one isn't very helpful. There are quite a few unbreakable coins here and there, but I don't think the payoff is worth the world trouble if you're not playing teams like middle teams, where you might want to consider it. Second buff, HP Manipulation, gives your IDs 25% max HP and removes their first stagger threshold. If you're having trouble in general, this one is an easy pick. It is just very comfortable to not have to care about your stagger threshold anymore when facing unbreakable coins, and being more safe in general. It gives enemies max HP as well though, and is not the best choice if you wanna save turns. Bloody Banquet gives lifesteal to your units and reduces bleed count every turn. Similar to the last buff, it is a good pick if you're struggling, and if you're not very fast, can save you in the last section. So I'd say it's my biggest recommendation if you're struggling. The heal often isn't much, but can also help you against unbreakable coins, making you spend less on healing egos. It gives max HP as well to enemies, so again, not a speedrunning choice. Life or Death just gives a flat 30% damage increase to your IDs at the cost of 25% of their max HP. Contrary to the more situational Wrathful counter, this one offers you damage increase at all times, perfect recommendation if you wanna shave off turns. Lasting Battle Spirit gives your backup IDs increased starting SP, permanent attack power, and some true resources for each of their skills. If you have actually useful backups, or have sacrificial strats, these can be very good, allowing you to not lose momentum during the battle. However, if you have neither of those, it's probably not worth it, giving enemies 1 clash power as well. Between this and ally skilled, you can probably stack a bunch of ego resources for using more egos. If you're playing Deviates or Full Stop Heathcliff as well and intend to get them out, not that you have much choice, these can be pretty useful as well. Last, but certainly not least, Resource Reaping might seem underwhelming at first, giving you 2 ego resources of a skill when killing a unit with it, but also using 2 more resources when using Awakening Egos. The important part though is in the debuff, consuming scenes from the affinities with the most resources. This means you can recycle your overfed supply of resources from your main scenes in exchange for maybe getting other ones. This one is better as well if you do want to use multiple egos, but will require some preparation on your part for it to be interesting. As for killing enemies, don't worry, there are a bunch to come. Choose the one you feel is more apt to your synergy, either for survival, damage, or ego spam. If you're hesitating, there's a second one coming up after the next fight, but I'll give details there. If you want to take Resource Reaping though, I'll advise taking it now. Now let's get on to the second wave, which is also an MVP Katula fight, featuring Kurokomo this time. It also has backup, featuring Burn, LCEs, and Middle. Once more, Blunt is really good here, so the same advice than before applies. Be careful, as Kurokomos tend to be somewhat tankier than the previous ones. This is even more true because you have to consider Ishmael's passive, which can make their coins unbreakable and them unstaggerable, but only if they can clash, so staggering them before works. So pay attention to the number of flush skill on the opposite side, as 3 will trigger it to adjacent allies and 4 to the whole team. His skill's counter passive will also activate, so be prepared to take a skill 1 to the face, or 2 counters in the worst cases, making him a priority to kill, or at least stagger. Luckily, most Kurokomos aren't too dangerous otherwise. On the upcoming backups, be careful of Don Sinclair removing stagger when taking its volatile ego form, SCE Sang's unbreakable coins, and Faust's ability to blow up, and the last 2 middle members being pretty tanky. The 3 final backups have more slash-oriented weaknesses, so you might want to prepare a slash AoE for them, like Don Sinclair Wild Dante's Cliff Skill 2, Yoshu's Contempt Tower or Red Eyes Open, Gregor's Garden of Thorns, etc. Otherwise, for the first part they are mainly weak to Blunt, so my recommendations are mostly the same as the previous station, but be careful on your ID's sanity, as spamming egos will reduce it, as well as your scene resources. You might want to prepare beforehand scene gains on kills, like Otis Bynes mentioned earlier, or Sinclair's Impending Day. After clearing it, you'll be able to select one of the buffs you didn't pick on the last selection. As you might have noticed, some go well together, and you might have wanted both Bloody Banquet and HP Manipulation for extra tankiness. So here is a place to take the other ones you wanted. Among my recommendations, taking Life or Death and HP Manipulation ends up leaving your Sinners without the first stagger threshold, and with 30% damage increase, and is overall just good. HP Manipulation can also go well with Wrestle Counter, if you ever wanted to play, well, counter, and so would Bloody Banquet, restoring the lost HP. Speedruns right now tend to use both Resource Reaping at first for scenes, and second Life or Death for the damage for the next stations. If you feel like sacrificing your Sinners for lasting Battle Spirit, Life or Death can haze the task as well. As you see, there are many possibilities depending on your playstyle, with more general ones as well, so pick the ones you prefer for you. Last fight of the section already, and second new abnormality, their Flushots, also called their Shooty, second of the name. The fight looks simple at first. It will use a few skills giving itself poise while gaining speed every turn, which will translate into more damage as well. A few unbreakable coins AoE, but nothing too scary. You deal enough damage to it, stagger it, and kill it before any of its mechanic has ever time to proc. Well, that's what happened to me every time. If you get it under 75% HP and not stagger it at 30%, it will summon Hads, bind itself to 1 speed, and gain shield, as well as 5 targeting settings. This status will stagger it at turn's end when at 0, losing stacks when its designated target fire doesn't shoot its intended target, marked by Stigmatized, or lose the clash. It will apply Stigmatized every turn on one of your slowest Sinner and one of its ally, using powerful AoEs having unbreakable coins on the targets, with your team as secondary targets, killing its main target most of the time and targeting only your IDs when it has no more allies. Pretty much working like Yiseng's Fell Bullet. Your goal there is to avoid stigmatized targets to be at the receiving end of it, redirecting designated target fire with faster allies, with clashes against those skills, and kill the enemy targeted by target readjustment fire, because you can't redirect it, while weathering the storm of unbreakable coins. It does have reduced AoE when not targeting stigmatized units or losing clash, so don't be too worried. Even if it seems complicated, the fight is overall pretty simple in practice. There's an event check to pass after it recovers from stagger from the zero targeting settings effect to weaken it as well. Its weaknesses being Gloom and Pride, Sinking and Poise are two great archetypes here. Its only part being its body makes it easier to stack any kind of keyword on it as well, though its Ice Loss Resistance makes Tremor the worst choice. And we complete the section with a choice between 4 unique buffs this time. All of them will give enemies 10% damage increase, so don't worry about it. Pendant of Nostalgia offers 10 poise potency to the 3 first deployed allies every turn. This one is the least useful if you took Nebulizer beforehand, because you're probably droning under poise already, and I don't think there are many reasons to pick this one instead, being more limited to a few IDs, the count from the previous one being pretty useful, unless you want a quick poise potency boost. Fell Bullet Deluge is funny, inflicting enemies with damage when your IDs die, by 50% of their HP. This is better if you took HP manipulation earlier and synergized with Lasting Battle Spirit, and in general is just a funny way to add damage to your sacrificial strats, so if you feel like killing Lanternis, then go ahead. It being on every enemy is a bit late, but there are occasions to use it. Festival of Blood is just a buff of damage for Blood Fiends, and that's about it. Consider it if you're playing them, but if not, there's no point. Lone Gunman though is pretty huge, increasing speed, sure, but especially replacing a skill 1 by a skill 3 for your first deployed ID. So if you have an ID with a particularly strong skill, let's say randomly, Managedon, you can double your amount of nukes. This is the most generally useful one, so if you don't know what to pick, just pick this one. So for this section, the choice on the IDs should mostly be done for the boss fight, being the only real consistent thing in the section. So this would mean that both Sinking and Poise IDs tend to have a great time. This is even more true when looking more carefully. Poise having buffs so strong earlier and impacting Ego's damage means it is probably the most popular and easy keyword here, with IDs like Full Stops or Blade Lineage having a fantastic time. One strat can be keeping Full Stop Eclipse at a logic bullet for their flushots, while using Egos a lot more beforehand. Bielmer Souls to claim their bones is also fantastic to use early, as well as Thoracalgia if you want even more poise, though if you took Nebulizer it isn't too necessary anymore. Sinking on the other hand is also very good, not only for their shooty, but also because of Wild Antiscliff, having insanely broken synergy with its Binds Ego, as he can use it and then use the skill 2, having benefits from its effect, allowing him to clear the second wave easily. The rest of the team can then prepare for the boss fight. The most important part is still the Egos, though those on screen are some of the most useful ones in general, due to their utility and or attack weight. Bringing one of the SP regen at the start of the fight is recommended, as it allows you to have an easier time. Overall, most teams can work here, and same for keywords. Tremor is the least appropriate, mostly due to their fluid shoot's resistance, but we can probably still make it work. Having an Isclay for egos like Pines and Yasunyata is a pretty good choice, same for Faust and Air Fluid Sac. You should be careful with your choice of buffs for the section, depending on your needs. Taking the one giving HP and defense are the easiest ones to clear the railway, but you might lean into the more offensive ones if you want to lower your total turn count. But once you're past it, it's time for section 3, the scariest part. And we're starting with everyone's favorite fight, Dulcinea and her children. Before anything, the one thing to know is the fight will end while Dulcinea is dead. Therefore, to go faster, you can disregard the other enemies most of the time, getting them staggered with an AoE, or only clashing when they are in danger. They will receive buffs from Dulcinea every turn though, with their 2 Wrath skills. You can ignore them most of the time, reducing the number of clashes. Dulcinea has a clashable counter, so careful with your unopposed attacks. She also has unbreakable coins, so careful with your health. She also inflicts back bleed on getting hit due to her status, so careful with your stacks. If you took Bloody Banquet or you own Dulcinea, you'll be relieved to see this part isn't as much of a problem. Her pattern is the same as in story. She'll gain Festive Fever every turn, depending on the number of allies, using an annoying AoE once at 10, inflicting bleed count. When killing her allies, she gains Imperfect Parade, and with enough, will use another annoying AoE. But the threat is when she gets under 33% HP, she will use a very annoying AoE, with unbreakable coins and inflicting a ton of statuses. If you see it, prepare to stagger her, kill her, or suffer. She has stagger threshold at 50 and 30% HP, so you can avoid it with proper management and enough damage. I did say you could ignore her allies, however she gains protection with each ally remaining, so killing at least a few will help if you don't have insanely high damage multipliers or damage buffs, and if all 9 allies are killed, she will get staggered, giving you an opportunity for high damage. Her weaknesses are mostly Lust and Envy, so Bleed, Charge and the Envy crews have a pretty good time. Middle Dawn liking counters might not like the Bleed however. Gluttony is also good, so you can try a few IDs like Deviats, Sanks or Sevens. And now, the merry-go-round again, proposing a whole new selection of buffs, with also some of the ones you had before. In fact, every non-unique buffs you had not picked before from both sections, so like every keyword buffs, and stuff like HP manipulation and life or death. To those are added 2 new general buffs. Dogged Defense reduces all damage you take by 50%. If you are still scared of dying, take this and you won't. It does come with reducing damage taken by enemies by 20% as well, so prepare for long fights if you do. Power Roulette is gambling, adding 1 to 3 final power to all your skills, but to enemies as well. While it is gambling, if you're not scared of enemies' skills at all, be it clashing or damage, this one will be a damage increase on your end, and if you're going for fast runs, you would want to consider it. But you would also want to consider one of the 7 buffs concerning scenes. For each scene, there is a buff increasing damage dealt with skills of the same affinity, as well as increasing the weakness of the final boss to the concerned scenes by 25%. If you have a scene that's more used, which is often the case with keywords, taking this one will be really useful for the upcoming fights to increase your damage. It comes with +1 enemy clash power and 10% damage increase, which is a fair trade. Again, choose based on your playstyle, and know that you'll be able to choose another one of the same list after the next fight. I'd advise taking one of the scenes in general during one of the 2 selection, unless you're using a complete melting pot of IDs. And so, we go into the second wave, featuring Bloodfiends, but your own, as it's an Envy Pekatula fight. No backup here, so the IDs you see are all you'll fight. They can be pretty dangerous though if they can consume Bloodfist, so don't let the fight last. A note here is that Bloodfist does not transfer through waves, which is particularly relevant for this section. So you will find the whole Bloodfiend crew, as well as Red Eyes Rearshoe and Rhino Assault. A few tanky units, but if you do like you did in section 2, you should be fine. Here PRC goes are pretty good, which concerns most high attack weight valves, and same for Lust as usual. Don's Dynamic Kala is obviously obliterating the team if you're using Bleed, and as an advice, targeting one of the Blood Fiends gaining Bleed, mostly Priest, is an easy way to get the conditions. Manager Don does resist both though, so you might have to be careful. Using multiple AoEs does pass the problem though, but as much as you won't be killing Gregor in one turn due to his passive. Which means you can also make sure your skills proc on him if you want resources or some effect. That's about it for the fight. As usual, spam AoE goes and win. You've got another choice of buffs before the third wave, the same as before. It's the last time you can choose these buffs as well, so choose carefully. Again, good choices for survival include dogged defense and HP manipulation, while life or death and power roulette are better for damage. If you have two scenes you're using, you might pick those two during the two selections, like for example Burn having a ton of wrath, but Magic Bullet being pride damage. So once more, choose at your own discretion. Now the third wave, featuring Bloodfiend Trio. The real one this time. The real refracted one at least. Another fight of love and hate featuring Bleed. Yeah, you probably understood by now that's the theme of the wall section. It is similarly annoying to the Pekatula fight of section 1, having way more health, but also being less resistant. Again, this fight behaves like in story. Bubber will try to snip allies, having an instant kill for allies under 30% HP, and a very strong unbreakable AoE after a few turns. This and a lower health and high number of weaknesses might make you want to prioritize her. Dulcinea still buffs allies with two other skills. However, do not neglect dealing with her, as she will start using AoEs when herself or when an ally gets under 50% HP, and her massive nuke under 25% HP. So you might want to focus her when getting close to threshold, or making sure she can be staggered. The last one you would want to deal with is the Priest, not only having higher HP, but being less of a threat early on, his strength increasing with Hailing Heart every turn. At max he will use a stronger pattern, but get fragile as well, being a good point to burst him down. He will also get fragile if not dealing damage, which means once he gets unbreakable coins it won't be possible anymore, especially when he's the last one alive. Damage skills with high attack weight are good for this fight if you can deal with the targeting. Weaknesses vary depending on the target, but Lust and Gluttony are once again high priority, with Gloom as secondary, or Envy for Dulcinea. So Bloodfiends and Kurokumos are having a nice time as usual, Managedon especially with Yonime Kala, and Deviat 6s or 7s as well. Syncing IDs aren't too bad in the end, allowing you to maybe make all of them panic, though they all have different sanity types. Charge IDs having both Gloom and Envy are also a possibility. This fight might be tough if you can deal with them fast enough, as they will get stronger as they consume Bloodfist, and the statuses can chip away at your Sinner's HP, so it's more of a race than a battle of endurance. Still persevere enough, use the goes as necessary, especially SP1s if you are using a lot, and good luck. This fight can be more or less tough depending on the buffs you took, the defensive ones allowing you to just not die, while the offensive ones can give you enough power to quickly rush through them, avoiding the mechanics. Once you've passed it, you have the right to one last buff to choose from. Choose carefully, as this one will change the difficulty of the last fight, one way or another. Comfy is just that. Comfy. Raising ally speed to allow better clashing, and increasing HP for survival, while giving the boss 3 defense level. Not much to say, if you just want to chill and don't care about turns, this is very safe. If you want to go slightly faster, which you might after having checked the boss, you have the right to one buff for each of the 3 physical types, increasing their coin power, and increasing the boss weakness by 50%. If you've got a type you are using more than the others, this might just be a good choice to increase your damage for the cost of 1 coin power on the boss as well. It does slightly increase the difficulty and damage you'll take, so think about it. But if you feel like speedrunning, for 2 coin power on the boss, you can have a high risk, increasing all allies damage by 10% and all physical weaknesses by 30%. To be honest, if you don't have a team made of every type, taking the power increase for your highest damage might be more advantageous, as you will hit the boss harder with it. The wall damage increase is still pretty strong, and if your damage is spread in your team, you will probably get more out of it. But once again, If you want none of it, you can still stay comfy. So choose your difficulty and head on to the last fight, all buffed up. So now, I present to you the 400 roses, or the 400 unbreakable coins. You like them? You're gonna see them a lot. Also, with all the different buffs, this thing has over 6000 HP. The highest so far, I'm pretty sure. Before Infinity Mirror at least. This thing's gimmick is all around Blood Fist once again. It would try to inflict you with bleed, with its numerous unbreakable coins, to gain Blood Fist, which it will consume to heal itself. It doesn't have much count to inflict outside one with passive, or with one skill, so if you clash with everything, you just have to deal with its cheap damage, which can grow annoying, so having a healing at the ready, be it ego or anything else, can be useful. The fight really feels like rubbing a thorny rose. It will grow stronger by healing and consuming Blood Fist, but will reduce its defenses. It has two parts, the body and the head. The head will regenerate, but has the lowest HP and closest stagger threshold. It will alternate its attacks between both parts though, keeping the strongest ones for the head, while having a bunch of smaller ones from the body. The head is the easier target overall, as long as you can afford it, and having it staggered often can reduce its nukes. Under 60% HP, or if it consumed an ungodly amount of Blood Fist, it will start using stronger moves, notably Brambles that yearn, a strong clashing AoE that you do not want to let happen, or a counter that will bleed you out. Despite everything, the fight is really straightforward, and more of an endurance test. Try dishing out as much damage as you can and get rid of that annoying plant. It will get stronger if you take too long though, but you should be fine. It has a check every 3 turns, where you have the choice between 4 options that will either give it attack power up and fragile, or attack power down and protection at the cost of your Sinner's HP. There is a lighter and harder version. The first is 1 power up and 1 fragile, and the last 2 of each, having Blood Fist as well. The second is 2 power down and protection for 10% HP, and the third 3 of each for 15% HP. The HP cost might not be worth the trouble if you don't have a problem with clashing, so ignoring it is the safer option most of the time, the last one if you have no worry about the damage or are trying to speedrun. Its weaknesses are entirely dependent on the buffs you took before, so no team is really encouraged or not. A note for bleed teams however that will generate Blood Fist, so if you don't have Blood Fist to consume it, or enough damage to outdamage its heals, you might want to avoid it. Also, every status infliction is capped at 50 potency on this fight, so you will be taking a bit more than you might expect. So my recommendations for this section are mainly based around the scenes for the first and third wave, the other 2 being varied or on your choice. Again, in general, having access to quick SP gain at the start, like Faust Fritzak or Escriptia Sunyata is advised, and same for setup egos like Ryoshu's Contempt Hog. As for teams, Bleed is the uncontested king here, with Bloodfiends and the newest Kurokumos. If you manage to make it work, some IDs have good scenes for the section, with Deviats, 5 and 7 IDs, where you could think of Rupture. Charge can be useful as well, if you manage the targets properly on third wave. Other archetypes can work, like Sinking or Burn. Again, it's about passing Dulcinea, and mostly the trio. All of them being sloth resistant, however, once more, it's hard to recommend Tremor. The choice of buffs is important overall, and if you're having trouble, taking Bloody Banquet at any point will help quite a bit, HP manipulation removing your stagger threshold also being useful. Again, remember that Blood Fist does not carry over waves. Manage your sins and sanity properly. Don't hesitate to use crippling egos like Crow's Eye View or Chains of Other on the more annoying bosses like Dulcinea if you're having trouble. Be careful of the amount of bleed you're taking, and you should be able to make it through. Once you've defeated the thorny punching bag that is Rose, congratulations! You'll have completed Railway 5. So I will conclude with my personal impression of the Railway. I think buffs are always fun, and those gimmicks are what makes some game modes interesting, like Mirror Dungeons, at least for the first runs. Even if some keywords have a somewhat unfair advantage, seeing stuff pop up like Nebulizer is still pretty cool, and the choices give players agency, allowing different playstyle to be taken. The fights themselves were okay, a lot of redundancy due to most being already seen, and MVP Catulas being ego fiestas. But the new bosses were interesting. The Rose in particular was fearsome, even if in terms of gameplay, depending on your experience, it can be a bit disappointing, mostly being a giant HP bar. But even then I enjoyed it a lot, enough to try lower turn count at least. But now that it's done, I'll be chilling while waiting for the next Saikanto. The next season... What is that? Huh? And the achievements? Now? Already? Ah shit. Here we go again. And at the end of this video. Thanks for watching. Final message, I had a fun time, and quite a few streams out of it, but I'll go back to lowering my number of streams for the moment. Unless achievements force me to. Thanks for this 5k subs by the way. I've said it multiple times, but I've got a few plans coming up later, and I'll probably say it again since I doubt any would be happening before the next season. I'll be giving news every Monday still, so subscribe and yada yada. In any case, see you next time, and keep your sighty high in this slow descent into the inferno.